Why, hello, friends? Could it possibly be that hello, friends is the correct introduction of the moment? A chance to really shine and thrive in my life for the first time ever? Is it possibly the case that only now, finally, I realized that we have everything we need to have it all? Already? No, just you have to wait until I explain it to you first. And then you'll have everything you need to have it all. I don't know about you, but if you're like me, you'd love to have it all. What does that mean? Why? Wealth, power, success, everything you've ever dreamed of, including spiritual enlightenment. See, this is one of those things that a lot of successful people miss out on. They go into the whole success game thinking we're going to get the chicks, we're going to get the dollar bills, we're going to go to the club, all that stuff, all the fancy cars. But if they don't attain enlightenment, isn't it still kind of like, second place still first loser, So that's why here at Complete Success Man Incorporated, we help you to be a complete success. That means all the material stuff, plus the immaterial stuff. Yes, we promise you enlightenment in just 3 short months with our symposium, Enlighten Yourself Faster, Harder, Stronger, Better, Now. Not where it's a working title. Yeah. That's how things are these days. Impossible to discern, no matter how hard you try. Yeah. That's exactly how things are these days. How much for one enlightenment? For you, I can give you a deal. $780. Pretty good deal. Really it is. Because, the list price is $1,600. How am I doing? How am I doing what? Why doesn't anybody ever answer that question that way, How you doing? How am I doing what? That's a good response to how you doing. I don't know how am I doing. What do I look like? An FI dom? Fine. I'm doing fine. Like most people, I'm always doing fine. Long ago, I discovered that it was the best way to do. Just do fine, and you'll be fine. Eric, if you do fine, you'll do fine. You won't be fine. Oh yeah. How sensual is the moisture that comes from my face? Is it as sensual as thou? This is one of Shakespeare's lesser known sonnets, of course. I mean, of course to me, since it's lesser known, it's obviously not a course to you. It could be a mystery to you. Let's see, what are we doing today? What are we talking about? We're talking about everything you need to have it all. You think it's not that much stuff? It's quite a bit of stuff you need. You really do. You better be well provisioned before you even begin to take on the journey of having it all. Even having only some of it is pretty difficult sometimes. How are you doing your thing optimally and efficiently in some less beneficial way, or in some less beneficial way? Well, I think I've been pretty effective lately in the sense of I think I've gotten a good number of videos up that have an audience somewhere, that are fairly desirable to watch by, personally, I don't want to watch the typing session because I just did the typing session, I don't want to watch those videos, but if you've never seen a typing session before, and especially if you just want to access it as a resource if you're working on typing or something like that, then those always get a pretty decent audience. And I've made a couple of edited videos, or a couple of prepared videos. One of them edited. I made my mask sharing video, which I feel pretty darn good about. Really, I like that mask sharing video. And then I made that argumentation video, which is also pretty damn good, frankly. And won't get as many views as I think it should get because people don't really like to be scolded. Let's see, what do I want to do right now? Been a while since I've been scolded. That should be fun. How about you, other self? How are you doing? But enough about me. How are you doing, other self? Is somebody tugging on your udders? Yeah. I know, it's a different spelling, isn't it? You're an utter self. You're not an utter self. Do you know if you go to like a farm store, they got this stuff called udder balm you rub on your cow's teats? I always wanted to get some for my woman. I thought that would be hilarious, Have to bust out the udder balm in the evenings and rub it on your woman. Sweetie, you know how sensitive your udders can get. Jesus, dude, it's like 4 a.m. It's 4:30 a.m. actually. 4:20 to the fizzive. But I'm still alive, so I might as well revive. I'm doing all right, but your udders are sadly touch-starved. Yeah, I'm sorry for everybody who's feeling touch-starved. When you have touch available to you in general, just like a hug during the day or something, as I do, we tend to take it for granted. But I remember I've been in periods of my life where I was very much touch deprived. Like in my early 20s, I probably went a couple of years without really touching anybody, Without getting any hugs or anything. I've moistened over the years. I was just boiling some shrimp, and here you are. What a strange sentence. I like good, strange sentences. Yeah, moistening is an appropriate thing. I was thinking about that earlier, like, the thing is, there's a big difference between knowledge and maturity. There's a big difference between ability and identity, you might say. And I guess the distinction I'm making, hi lawnmower, the distinction I'm making here specifically links to the idea that you have abilities, right? And there's a period of time where you may be asked to do something, and you know that you may do that thing more or less well. Let's say something that requires an ability. Eventually, you stop linking the instances of those use of abilities so much to the identity part. So it's like, basically you internalize, yes, I have this ability, it's part of who I am. I don't have to constantly keep checking to make sure it hasn't gone away or that I wasn't just lying to myself or something. Whatever the ability is. At least for EHPs. You start to be comfortable having faith in certain aspects of yourself remaining the same. Greetings. Or greeting cards. Yeah. I really like shrimp, and I really Osteric, so all's well that ends with lemon and butter. Okay, well, I have to tell everybody, I'm going to give you a bit of a warning. I don't like shrimp. Sorry, I just don't like shrimps. I do like crayfish. And, crab's okay, I guess. But in general, I don't like things that come from the water. Hey, Rafael Alberieros. What's the best feeling in the world? Well, the question, what's the best feeling in the world, evokes a clarifying question, first and foremost, that, what kind of feeling are you talking about? Are you talking about a sensation that your body experiences? Or are you talking about an emotion? Or is there some other kind of feeling? I guess the other kind of feelings are emotions, like, like feeling excited about something, but if you're really saying what experience can I point to that I would reliably expect to provoke such a response, it's a slightly different question than from your own personal experience, which has provoked the biggest response. Watching sports is depression now. Yeah, well, Rachel showed me a little clip of people in Boston. Um, uh, returning to normal, just regardless, and just sort of all gathering at a sports game and not having masks on and stuff like that. I think it's important that people do that because it shows that that people can't lie their way into convincing everybody anymore, But regardless, Gator? I may have had Gator only one time in my life, and it tasted like this. So, I don't like frog legs. I had those when we went out to dinner for Delilah's birthday. You like sashimi? I was just saying what it sounded like, Lawnmower. I prefer sushi to sashimi because here's the reason why. It's because I like the rice part underneath the fishes. I gotta get a little bit of food in my belly, I think. I should have eaten a little bit more than I did before I started this. All I had was a coffee cake. I think I need to go outside and get a Lunchable. And that should probably help provide a little sustenance. Sometimes it's called sustenance, sometimes you might call it nutrition. So, one thing I will say is I don't feel like I really necessarily spent the night super productively tonight, but it's hard to say. Oh yeah, Isaac Grigetta. The thing is, what could be more convenient, right? It's the most convenient thing you can eat that's almost real food. Not quite real food, but Alright, now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go get this food, and then I'm going to play the song in the background while I'm going to get this thing. If Jesus was people but absent of sin,
He must then have struggled with regular men and women, of course, when they too were present. Disciples all warily eyeing the lesson. People aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing forever is lost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. If people were Jesus, they'd know what they think, and everyone's work would be true. And feelings once spoken would sit where they sink, and we'd all know just what to do. But people aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing forever is lost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. The one you thought you knew, acts like you never have met. The life you made for two has faded into regrets. No one unshaken, we all have been shook. But being forsaken don't mean you're forsook. Though in the past you've been hung out to dry, we'll find them at last. We just have to try. People aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing forever is lost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. If Jesus was people but absent of sin, he must then have struggled with regular men and women, of course, when they too were present. Disciples all warily eyeing the lesson. People aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing forever is lost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. If people were Jesus, they'd know what they think, and everyone's work would be true. And feelings once spoken would sit where they sink, and we'd all know just what to do. But people aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing forever is lost. Maybe naive is not to be saved, but the wise pay a terrible cost. The one you thought you knew, acts like you never have met. The life you made for two has faded into regrets. No one unshaken, we all have been shook. But being forsaken don't mean you're forsook. Though in the past you've been hung out to dry, we'll find them at last. We just have to try. People aren't Jesus once they're betrayed. The easy believing for cost.
And we're back. I'm better than ever. So there, yeah, I linked you the lyrics with the chord. And I was so super SI responsible when I went outside that I didn't just get an Uncrustable. I also got a burrito. But of course I have to wait for the burrito to cool because if you know anything about frozen burritos, you know that they are a recipe for mouth burn. Anybody who's had frozen burritos knows this. If you cook a frozen burrito in the microwave and you just bite right into it, forget about it. You are going to be all over mouth burn town. You're going to be driving the streets of mouth burn town, getting pulled over by the mouth burn PD, and having your mouth burned is a fine for your traffic violation. So you got to be careful with those frozen burritos. You just let it sit there for a while. Just don't rush it. You're not that hungry. Come on. You don't want to burn your mouth. It's pig Latin. It's pig Latin lawnmower. You know, like hello. The first word. Something like that. I don't know. Too hard to figure out. What do I look like? A figure or router? I don't think so. So I'm feeling, what's the word? He will resign in December under agreement for a Pence pardon. That's not an outrageous notion. It wouldn't be stunning for him to do that. I wouldn't be shocked if he did that. It makes sense in a way because it gets them, make sure he's clear for, you know, his post presidency life without any baggage. That seems like possible. There's a satirical show in Germany, and some of the shows are great, but until now, they have not been able to make good jokes with Trump. Oh. I mean, he might finish. Who knows? I mean, he might win and begin serving a second term. It's certainly not an outrageous notion either. So, we'll see what happens. I feel this anxiousness about the whole thing. Like I'm supposed to do something about it, but I have to wait for something to happen. I'm not sure what it is. Biden's, I mean, put it this way. If I had to choose between Trump and Biden, and like I couldn't pick none of the above, I guess I'd pick Trump. It were impossible for me to abstain, and I couldn't pick somebody else, and I had to pick between Trump and Biden, I guess I'd pick Trump. I think Biden is, I'd rather go with the evil we know. How dare I what? I mean, the thing about Biden is I don't think he's competent at all. Not that I think Trump is, but at least I understand the scope and quality of Trump's incompetence, which I think is less encompassing than Biden's. Hello, Angantier. I mean, I get you, Genexiel, and that's a good reason. Um, at least with Trump, I know that I know who the person in charge is, and I know I've got a wounded duck president, and I know he's pretty much um, he's been a second term Trump will be declawed essentially. He's not gonna be able to accomplish much of anything. I'll probably be fighting battles about people trying to prosecute him for shit the whole time. Um, so in that regard, I think Trump would make a better choice just because it's a lot more predictable. You can predict what that second term of that administration would look like, how it would wind down, how it would sort of fall apart. Um, but I mean, the other thing is, I don't. It's not like I favor uh, federal government comprised of experienced bureaucrats accustomed to mindless statism. That's not much better than Trump's chaotic, arbitrary, you know, ESFP administration. Well, to the extent that those Jesus freaks successfully constrain the reach of government, then that's a good thing. Um, you sounds like you're a little bit one issue, maybe, or that you've conflated a person's beliefs, religious beliefs, with incorrectness about the law or politics, and that's just ridiculous. Do I seriously think that I will become president in this lifetime? Yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, I do. Look, the division between church and state is all well and good, but it seems to me that of all the odd things to focus on as a problem in the country, um, it seems like an odd one. What do you think these judges are going to do that you're going to disagree with? Look, there's a lot of things I don't approve of with Trump, but what I do know for sure is to the extent that we're going to make progress in becoming an effective nation again, an effective citizen democracy with a leadership that is successful in doing its job, that we're going to need to stop playing this silly blame game that we like to play. Like for example, this is the point I was making the other day, Gen X Seal, and it applies to lawnmowers to some extent too. But we're gonna have to get over the idea that it's not good enough to win. We have to have our enemies lose too, and that's where we are right now. So it's like Gen X Seal is somebody saying he hates Trump so much that he's willing to set aside winning more as a country, as whatever, to make sure the other guy loses. Now, I get that there's an instinct towards justice that says if there's been wrongdoing in the past, blah, 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 let's remedy it by punishing those people. But the thing is, now we have an opportunity to to take a different approach. Anybody who talks to me and discusses with me my candidacy has an opportunity to be a real patriot and to be a real adult in a citizen democracy, which is to say, let's discuss how we can find common ground in our discourse, not necessarily in our positions. Let's understand that for whatever position you hold a strong position on, there's likely a more nuanced understanding that's more complete, more accurate, and less divisive. If we can articulate those kind of positions about whatever it is your pet issue is, remember, everyone in the country practically has their own pet issue. Janexiel's pet issue is, he's going to really want me to be on his side on his pet issue. But my whole point is, I don't have an agenda. My only concern is to be the best president I can be, and to be as correct as possible about each of the specific policy issues, policy considerations in front of me. A presidency is made up of choices, what one chooses and how one chooses, and stuff like that. It's not made up of whether or not you're on the right team before you get elected according to this voter or that. It shouldn't be. Voters shouldn't be considering that stuff. It's irrelevant. I'm on no team. I would like to think that Sean Ryan Barron, but unfortunately, well, in my experience so far, I've found myself becoming more effective at talking to people about this and more comfortable talking to people about this. At first, when you start talking to people about this, there's a lot of disbelief and a lot of poo-pooing and a lot of not taking it seriously, and etc. But I've been talking about it for quite some time now, and have been keeping people updated sort of on the timetable. There was a strict time when I was planning to run in 2020. That didn't turn out to be plausible for a couple of reasons. First of all, I had to come back here and help my dad with my mom. That was something that it needed to be done, and I figured that would occupy my life for the next couple of years, and then I'd be able to run in 2024. Well, what ended up happening is my dad moved my mom to this nursing home, but then COVID happens, So that's what's been going on for 2020. I really would very much like to gain enough notoriety on the public stage to be known as a candidate for 2020, just regardless of primaries and everything else. I want to be known as a candidate and get write-in votes in the general election, something like that. Some sort of progress that entails me having much greater visibility than I currently have. Because, of course, the only way I'm ever actually going to win the presidency is if I have a lot of people hear me. Being heard by a lot of people is a difficult proposition. So, my big advantage is I believe I can talk to people, with people, about politics, etc., better than anybody else. That's good suggestion, Angantyr. No, I don't plan to manipulate people. I plan to appeal to their most noble selves. I don't plan to mislead people. I will seek in my argumentation those true arguments that are more palatable to somebody, for example, and try not to be adversarial. But I will never misrepresent my position, and I will never try to influence you without being willing to inform you about what and why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't want to. I'm not a social engineer, okay, like C.S. Joseph. How do I differentiate? And the differentiation is consent, meaning is the other person fully informed? If I'm aware that every time I say this thing to you, you are likely to overreact and get yourself into trouble, and I keep that to myself, this knowledge, to utilize against you at some point, or to utilize for my own purposes at some point, irrelevant of your interests, well, then I'm manipulating you, not just because I used it for that purpose, but because I was aware of it and didn't bring it to your attention. So I had a chance to inform you that this was a habit of yours I'd observed that one might be able to exploit if one wished to. Basically, it violates the deontological imperative against using a person as a means to an end. So, my plan is to both be honest and persuasive and a lot of things. But remember, this is perhaps the most important thing of all. There's only one person in the country who can say, I am the most, by a large margin, and possibly the only actually qualified candidate for president in this country, who can say that and believe it and have it be believable. As far as I can tell, there's just one, and that's me. There's only one person in the country who meets those qualifications, who can say, I am the most qualified person in the country for the job, possibly the only qualified person in the country for the job. I will tell it to you, I will believe it, and you, in general, won't think I'm crazy. But instead, we'll go, maybe he's not just blowing smoke. Maybe, this guy's talking a lot of sense. That is right there tells you pretty much everything you need to know. I can hear that's okay because you live in New Zealand. So I don't think it would count for me anyway. I don't think we get to count New Zealand votes. Last I checked. How will you solve the problem of people running from the problem and not solving it? Well, I guess it would depend how that problem manifests, but as a general rule, my point should be that my job as president will be to do the job of the executive in regards to attending to national problems. The voter shouldn't have to worry particularly about that, but I will be fully transparent, and if they want to worry about that and pay attention to what I'm doing, then I'll certainly make that available for everybody. Alright, so Lawnmower, I disagree that that's manipulation. Okay, so any sort of consensual agreement does not comprise manipulation. If I say, do this and I'll give you $100, it's not manipulation. It's an offer to pay you to do a gig. It's different. And depending on how highly you value cookies, your example there is equivalent. God knows I wish I were paid in cookies. Resto Druid. What's a Resto Druid? Like a druid that rests super well? What would that healer do? Put his magic healing hands on all the problems and poof? Well, the point I'm trying to make is if there are problems that need to be addressed, what my campaign is all about is trying to convince people, first of all, that I'm the safest hands to put them in. The powers of the presidency. that I will make sure they get addressed if they are significant enough, and I will address them the right way. I'm not representing an agenda. I want to help lead the country in the way that's best for the country. I want in part to do that by not being ideological and not representing any agenda, but instead dealing with issues as they arise one at a time and on their own merits, with less of a with getting rid of the arbitrary frame that predefines our conclusions that a lot of people seem to carry around with politics. Eric, what class do I mean? What do you mean, what class do I mean? I mean, that's the thing also, Gen X, is I hope to be exactly that. Not just a politician. I'm not a politician, okay? I'm a statesman. I'm running for president because we need a real statesman. And that's one of the things I can provide that I don't think any of the other candidates can. I understand what it means to be a statesman. It's a lost art in this world. There was a brief period of time where what we now call politicians were being genuine leaders and constraining the power, the ability to centralize power for the benefit of all, but also enabling centralized power to do what it needs to, again, for the benefit of all. And trying to establish principles by which we understand what it means to be a public servant and to fill in that role in our citizen democracy. I don't think people take that stuff seriously anymore. I never hear any candidates talk about it. Can God make a rock so big even he can't smoke it? Bro, no. Here, Jesus, finish this bowl for me, please. What? You can't smoke that crack, Dad? No, it's too much, man. Oh, hilarious. You engage in public political issues on a local level, Eric? Might be a good idea to build some reputation. It's a very TE notion. No, I'm not, I'm not interested in the same reason that I'm the right choice for president is the same reason why I'm the normal approaches people take towards building up towards higher levels of political office, etc., are obviously not routes I'm going to take, and the reason is because those people, almost everybody needs to first learn what it means to be a public servant, probably at the local level, etc., all the way up. Most people you talk to and ask, they don't understand even how the office of the presidency works. They don't know what a desk veto is. It's like people have a poor sense of civics and government. In contrast, I've spent my whole life preparing for this, and I'm more prepared than anybody could possibly be doing some other way of preparation for it. There are elements of the job, I'm sure, that will be challenging, but like I said, I'm going to take the approach of a statesman to the matter. I'm running for president in order to lead the country successfully beyond divisive wedge issues, to be a quote-unquote bridge builder, but not in some dorky sense that nobody can buy into. Rather, here's a nuanced understanding of it in which neither of you get to win and neither of you have to lose. Deal with it. That kind of stuff is not touchy-feely bridge building. That's being mature adults and dealing with things in a nuanced way. When we do that, we find things are not terribly divisive. But that's what's going to be required in my administration. and it's going to be required of the Congress as well. I'm not going to allow foolish children to don suits and pretend to be legislators of the United States of America, heaping just desecration upon the institutions with their ignorance and intellectual immaturity. Well, I will be calling them out on it. Now, note, I don't plan to be calling out a bunch of voters on anything, really. It's like, I understand. Voters have a pretty straightforward job. Pick the competent person. It's my responsibility to do the rest, you know? But if you're a legislator, for goodness sakes, you should be able to pass a basic civics class, for example. You should be principled in your approaches and your understanding. You should be humbled by the responsibility, first and foremost. Communism is a temporary setback on the road to freedom. Actually, communism is not. That's not en route to freedom. That's the opposite direction. Well, I mean, I would say the following. If I were able to implement the changes to the tax code that I would like to see implemented, in other words, we could get Congress to cooperate on this, I would like to see an elimination of progressive taxation, ideally an elimination of the collection of income tax and a replacement with a national sales tax. Sales taxes are genuinely progressive because the more you spend, the more you pay in taxes. So-called progressive taxes, like income taxes and such, are actually regressive because for complicated reasons. I mean, mostly because that money that the government extracts from people who make more money, the additional money besides just look, if everybody pays 10% of their income, let's say, people who make more money will pay more in real dollars than people who make less money, because 10% of more is more than 10% of less. But the problem is that's not considered progressive enough, right? So people go, well, let's make the rich people pay 15%. The thing to remember is all of those dollars eventually get back into the economy if they're left with the people who earn them. And you are not doing anybody any service by essentially, what the government's doing is, it's like a payday loan. It's like saying, okay, well, here's some money in advance, but now you're always going to be short every month because you have to pay off the payday loan thing. That's what the government's doing. When the government says, let's take 30% of your income in Social Security, 33% of your income in Social Security, they're saying, you can't use that 33% for taking care of your mom, for example. You got to set it aside so that the government will take care of you when you're old. Well, if we return that 33% to everybody, there'd be plenty of resources in the country for individuals to take care of their own. Now, granted, there are some people who don't have their own family and people for them and such, and that's an issue. It's a problem. The thing to remember is we are arguing now about some sort of ideal state of taxation. But as president, I'm inheriting the government we have. Which means if you want to ask me what my taxation priority would be, it would be to eliminate capital gains taxes. Capital gains taxes are one of the most regressive forms of taxation you can possibly have because they compel people to hold longer onto investments and not move money as often. When money moves, people benefit. When you move money, you need assistance to move that money sometimes. You have to hire somebody. That's how new wealth gets generated. Look, I'll put a link to my platform. If you want to talk economic stuff, I think before I just start rambling about a bunch of things, look at the platform because look at the section on economics. Most people, when they're asking economic questions, don't even know they don't have a definition of wealth, for example, which is pretty important if you think you have some sort of position on economics, you know. Mia and the Mia, here's the Mia. So, a lot of people have questions. Start there. It's not done. So, if there's specific sections that you're like, what, you didn't say with this thing, I need to finish it. I know. I don't have an issue with wealthy people. I just feel a flat income tax for every person makes more sense. There are exemptions or loopholes. I mean, I don't understand what's the problem with a sales tax. A sales tax is a much better approach. Then, instead of the government having to figure out how much every single person earns, keep track of that, and take a percentage of it, they just have to deal out with the businesses, which is a much smaller chunk of people and is sort of inherently something we accept more. The government is going to be involved in businesses more than they're going to be involved in interfering with people, Think about the huge amount of loss to drag that occurs because of the systems of the federal income tax. There's all this bureaucracy of making sure you're compliant. There's all these services people hire to try to make sure you pay as little as you can while being compliant. It's very much like a fungus growing from a wound on a tree that begins to sap, and it saps steadily some of the energy of the tree. If you start allowing too much of that stuff occurring, then you got a big problem. When you've got a 14,000 page tax code, then you've got a big problem. This is not working. I mean, additionally, look, the thing is, remember, I'm not starting from scratch. I don't get to design the government we'd like to have. And I have to work with the Congress and the Senate to do legislative stuff. There's more promising opportunities to be accomplished by the Justice Department and getting precedents set in the courts to establish case laws different. And that would be probably my primary strategy. Gen Xio. Now look, here's the thing. Here's a true statement. Gen Xio crazily says, this is why the wealthy don't get audited. Here's a true statement. Only the wealthy get audited. You couldn't, that's just fact, that's counterfactual by any sane human being's assessment. That is completely counterfactual. Try making a little bit of money, and you see just how much the IRS gets involved in your affairs. Okay? I mean, that's just absolutely insane. Now, granted, if you're very, very wealthy, you probably can afford sufficiently robust tax services that you're unlikely to get audited because everything's got every single I dotted and all the T's crossed. Well, that's to be understood, that if you don't break any of the rules, you won't be audited. So is it likely that the ultra wealthy are very cautious in that fashion and manage to avoid getting audited? Sure, that's possible. I suppose, but I guess it depends how you define wealthy as well. People without any money don't get audited, okay? This is why progressive taxation is regressive, because progressive taxation creates a system in which the richer you are, the more help you have to avoid taxes. If it's progressive, you have to come up with these complicated rules. As the tax code ages, it gets more and more and more and more and more complicated. As people put in various different exemptions to try to make it fair, it gets more and more and more unfair because it's fundamentally a wrong idea. To try to do progressive taxation is to necessarily incur this consequence where the people who are most able to work this tax code are going to pay less taxes than those less able to work the tax code. Genexial. Okay. So this is going to be a good opportunity. This is going to be a good learning opportunity. I'm going to Google this. I'm going to find the article and explain to you why we shouldn't believe stuff like this. The IRS audits the working poor at about the same rate as the wealthiest 1%. In response to questions from a U.S. Senator, the IRS acknowledged that it's true, but professes it can't change anything as let's give them more money. ProPublica reported the disproportionate audit focused on lower income families in April. Okay, so here's the best explanation for this, probably the accurate one, is I don't doubt. First of all, you're right basically about your claim. There has been a push towards a certain population. From what it sounds like, the IRS was instructed or decided to target abuse of a certain specific loophole that non-rich people used. And is that a good idea? Well, it's an inevitable consequence of progressive taxation. As I said, it's like, it doesn't matter. You're missing the point. The IRS is not, when the IRS audits a poor person, what is lost? It says there, it's like, okay, those poor people might have their refund held, is what it says. Okay. When the IRS audits rich people, they take more money from them. They've already taken a bunch of money from them, and they're saying we're going to need to take more now. There's no refund ever being given. Rich people don't get refunds. So what you're saying is, this is absurd. These poor people, these working poor, deserve to pay zero taxes. And the government's holding their refund because they think they may have tried to close this, they may have abused this loophole for some tax credit. I understand, of course, that you're saying you can't believe how the IRS would prevent this working person from paying nothing in taxes. Nothing. As though he's entitled to his refund, right? For the money the government took from him in taxes. Why aren't rich people entitled to their refund for the money that the government took from them in taxes? Because of course, there's an inequality here that's unjust and will not be sustainable. You can't win the argument because if you're right, then these working poor actually do pay something in taxes. And if I'm right, then they still pay nothing in taxes. And the rich people carry all the burden. You've got to understand that it's not helping anybody. When you take money from rich people, you don't make poor people richer. If you want to make everybody richer, stop taking money from everybody. Because that's why they're not so rich. It's like, look, anytime the government spends money on something, there is a loss of about 25%. So if the government wants to spend $1, it needs to get $1.25 from the population. If the government wants to spend 75 cents, let's do it this way. It needs to get $1 from the population. Now that dollar, if spent by the population, will do $1's worth of economic activity. Whereas if spent by the government, it do 75 cents worth. When you start extracting billions and trillions of dollars from the population and returning it to them in services and other forms at a rate of, 3 returned for every 4 gotten, well, it becomes quite a substantial drag on the prosperity, the engine of the country, the engine of the nation. Gen Xio, look, you don't have to vote for me if you don't want to, but what I'm saying is, if nothing else, I would like you to go away from this conversation aware of the fact that you are not engaging, that it's time to grow up. You're not engaging honestly. I don't think America was great then. Do you? I mean, we had segregated schools and a bunch of other things. And as a matter of fact, the state of the nation was not at all better than it is now. Even if things in the nation were good, there's no reason to think they were good because of that. And regardless, you misunderstand the nature of wealth if you think that will help. Please read the platform, the section on wealth, so you understand what it is. Wealth is what's created. It's a metaphysical quantity of something, okay? A metaphysical thing, not a physical thing. Wealth is created when people do useful work for each other. The more utility you provide, the more wealth you create in the world. The current problem is the way money, which represents wealth, is put into the economy doesn't make any sense, and I would like to, if possible, address that. The thing is, people like you, Gen Xio, and other such agenda people, you might call them, just like every other agenda person, you want me. Because, first of all, I understand the reality of things, not just how strongly I feel about things. I'm not going to allow anybody else's wrongness to be imposed either. So, if you genuinely want income equality, let's say, let's call it wealth equality. If you think that wealth inequality is a big problem, then, for example, you definitely want to vote for me. I'm going to have the most solvency for wealth inequality. I think that, in fact, there is a role for government to solve wealth inequality. However, it requires us to eliminate in-kind services and replace them with actual cash payments. Then you lose the drag. There are 5 distinct warrants for why it is always bad to use in-kind benefits, and that's something we need to eliminate. I do have a plan that doesn't involve raising taxes that can provide a universal basic income, which I think is a good idea. I think a universal basic income is a good idea as a way of redistribution. In other words, if you want to take money from rich people, fine. And you want to split it evenly amongst everybody and give it back to people, great. That's an explicit redistributionist policy. Fine, we can possibly do that. But we're going to do it right. Because when people like you, Gen Xio, seriously, listen to me. When people like you are allowed to run rampant over public policy with your agendas, you think you're doing the right thing, and you end up kicking yourself in the ass every time. Now, what I will do is actually accomplish the laudable goals of yours that are laudable, and I will not be persuaded or taken aside by the things that you're saying that are not correct. Whether or not you want to jettison those ideas or not is irrelevant. What I'm trying to tell you is this. In the same way that others don't need to worry about me being agenda driven like you don't have to worry about me being agenda driven by like other people. So other people's agendas aren't going to influence me either. I'm going to do the right thing no matter what. So if I'm rich and you take 90% of my money in taxes, doesn't that create equality of outcome? Because you made me poor now. Of course, if in fact I'm rich and somebody else is poor, any sensible human being would understand that the solution is not to make me poor, but to make the other person rich. You don't want two poor people. That's not better than one rich person and one poor person. Well, if you take 90% of your income, yeah. Of course. Approximately as poor. So let's say, because, you know, it depends what you call rich, but let's say you make $250,000 a year and you get taxed at the top rate, and it's 90%. Somebody else makes $50,000 a year. Well, and let's say they only get taxed 10%. Well, they have a bigger take home than you do. You only get your $25,000 a year, and they get $45,000 a year. Right? I mean, it's like you're taking 90% of their money. Why would I work for $250,000 a year if I know I'm only going to have a take home of $25,000? Right? That's intellectual dishonesty? I mean, Genexial. Come on now. No. Listen, Genexial. If you take 90% of $250,000, how much do you leave for me? What's 10% of $250,000? It's $25,000. Okay? So if, in fact, you want to tax people at 90%, then, and you want to say $250,000 is a high enough earning to justify the maximum rate, then you're talking about somebody working for $250,000, getting a salary of $250,000 a year, which is sufficient to, say, live in New York, and taking home $25,000 a year, which is not even sufficient to live in Missouri, in the boonies. So yeah, making you poor. No, Genexial, you said things were good when the government took 90% of taxes from people who were wealthy. When I pointed out that that would take somebody who was rich purportedly and make them poor, you said I was being intellectually dishonest. I gave you a concrete example of it that proves what I said, and now you're saying I'm making up a scenario. So you're not engaging honestly right now. You're reinventing the history that we just experienced. And certainly I'm not going to let that slide by unnoted. Fairly enough, you know, you wouldn't expect me to let that slide by unnoted. That's called sarcasm about hypocrisy? What are you talking about? No, I made an actual argument. I answered what you said. I proved it wrong. I gave an example. And then you started attacking my intentions or legitimacy of my arguments or something. I don't know why, because, like I said, I'm right, and I already established that and explained it all to you. So, you know, there's no further thing to be said about it. Okay, well, I mean, if you think society is in a good place when it taxes the richest people 90%, you and I are in stark disagreement with each other. You have an irrational faith in the government. Look, it's really pretty straightforward. If the government had any meaningful capacity to solve economic disparities with tax dollars, it would long since have done so. What positions do I have on the gun laws? I mean, I believe in the right to bear arms, and I don't think that that's an unlimited right. I think every reasonable person agrees that the fact that you have the right to bear arms doesn't mean you have the right to have a tank. So, now, it's not quite true, Genexio, that the government is just another gun. So, in this analogy, it's like you might say, well, a coffee shop's just another business. Government's not. Government is unique in its requirement, especially in a citizen democracy, and it's requiring of the citizens to approach it from a principled fashion. Government's very much prone to immaturity. People who are immature in their thinking about society, agenda-driven people. It's subject to all sorts of things. In fact, unlike a marketplace, which is honest and rewards success with business and punishes failure with going out of business, government as an organization has no such natural mechanism to address quality control. The voters can vote in and out people, but they can't rely on their representatives to do quality control not only over what those representatives are doing now, but over what's already come before. I don't think we need militias. I mean, militias exist to raise the men of a community up in arms in order to address, say, an invading force, bandits, marauders, or other threats to the public health and safety, public well-being and safety. That we don't need militias because it's not going to happen. I don't think we need an INTJ president, James. I think we need me as president. Well, here's the other thing is when I am president, you know, like any president, I'll be the face of the government. Unlike other presidents, however, I'll be a face that's very much engaged with the populace about the arguments they're making. So you'll hear Trump periodically echo arguments he's heard on TV or read on Twitter or something, but ignore all those arguments that don't support him or something. I want the population to understand why I'm not siding with him on something when I don't, and for them to recognize that it's not because I'm on any team. Like I'm not on the other team. I'm not opposing their ideology. I don't care about their ideology. It's there's specific reasons for every specific decision I make as to why it's made the way it was. And if your decision, if you think it should be decided differently, you deserve to have an explanation as to why I did that way. And I will try to explain everything thusly. Which means I'll try to address all the arguments being made out there about what's wrong with what I'm doing and make sure that people understand that no, they are wrong and that's it, you know? I mean, I don't think that would necessarily hurt Sean Ryan Barron to have people in Congress understand that they're doing it as a service. It's not really a career move. I mean, that's how I'm approaching the presidency, but it's kind of unreasonable to think that legislators should be unpaid or government officials should be unpaid. It is a public service. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be paid. Ban them from working for lobbying firms for life is a reasonable advocacy. I think that's not unreasonable at all. Okay, reduced. Well, politicians don't really make a lot of money. Congress is not a particularly well-paying job. Pays about as well as a police sergeant in the LA area, anyway. Okay, so who would I have as my running mate? Aaron says I need a TE user. I think I need a TE. Ideally, I need some TE users on the campaign team and various places. I'm not sure I need a TE user as a vice presidential candidate. Although, presumably it would appeal to a different demographic. I could conceivably, I possibly could think about that. I would like to. I mean, it's an important question. If you can get the right person, I historically said I'd like to get Dave Chappelle as my vice presidential candidate, but if you can get the right person as your VP candidate, that can help bring in some demographics that are less accessible to you. I mean, it's a tricky question because I want somebody like me who's non-ideological. That is to say, they don't come in. They're both knowledgeable about politics, but don't have strong team affiliations. And that's rare. Most people who are very knowledgeable about politics also feel very strongly about this is correct, that's incorrect, yada yada yada. But they don't do it on a case-by-case basis. They typically do it on a overarching sort of position about, people have a lot of weird thoughts about the government. Bye, Gen X. You'll have a pleasant day. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. trying to think. I have a place in the administration for Taylor, I'm sure, but I don't think that place is vice president. I'd like, it'd be cool if I get a woman. Appeal to the old chick contingent. Let me see. Who would be a good chick to be the vice presidential candidate? Some sort of public figure that already has good. Would be a weird vice presidential candidate. It would probably be a successful endeavor in a lot of ways. Rachel Ray as a vice presidential candidate. You think that would get me a lot of SFJ votes? Or Dr. Phil. Get Dr. Phil as my vice presidential candidate. I don't know if there's been an ex-NTJ president or not. Probably. I'm sure there has, but I don't know the types really. Well, who else could I get as it's a chick that I could get to be vice presidential candidate? I can't really think of any either at the moment, but I can't think of any chicks. Okay, what would be my policy on extraterrestrial life forms? Would they be treated as regular old foreigners? No. And my reasoning would be, as long as they fly directly and land in America, then they haven't actually crossed any borders. And so they couldn't possibly be immigrating logically. They must have been here all along. Who would you run on the Republican ticket if Trump didn't accept the nomination? What, are you saying would I run on the Republican ticket? Yeah, I'd run on a major party ticket if circumstances made that possible. I'll tell you who I could pick. I know I would be okay with it being a vice president for me. Would be Damon Gray, aka Chad Crandall. He's an ENTJ who I like his approach to politics. Very TE. Who would you run on the Republican ticket if Trump didn't accept the nomination? Me. That's who I'd run. If I had the choice. I wouldn't put Condoleezza Rice. That's for sure. I mean, she's not a bad choice. Would I accept Condoleezza Rice as a vice presidential candidate? Yes. So it's like if Condoleezza Rice wanted to and was willing to run on my ticket, I think that would be a good choice. I don't actually think she'd be a good choice, but I think she'd be a good choice for getting elected reasons. But who knows? Maybe she'd be a good choice overall, in general. Would you have food tasters? Probably not. Probably not food tasters. if I couldn't run, if I were in charge of the Republican Party, like a strategist for the Republican Party, and trying to decide who to run on the Republican Party ticket, and didn't know about me, for example, I would just go. I mean, if anybody's better than what we got now, it's like just pick somebody at random, basically. Couldn't be bad. It couldn't be any worse than Trump, and the whole Republican Party's selections in that last election were just catastrophe after catastrophe. Marco Rubio. Isn't he the guy who got super thirsty when he was giving that speech and drinking his water and stuff? Is that Marco Rubio? I think so. Not genuinely autistic, Angantyr, because that means they would have mental retardation. Would I consider somebody who's on the autism spectrum? Well, I don't believe in the autism spectrum, so yeah, I would. I believe in actual autism, which causes retardation. I don't believe in this, like, I'm normal, but I've got a disorder anyway, that somebody said, because they don't like that I'm not socially graceful. You know, it's like, who else did the Republicans try to run? I mean, the Democrats don't have anybody either. There's nobody competent. The thing is, there's nobody out there who actually has the answers to everything and is correct about everything. So, of course, there's nobody competent. There's no politician that wants to engage with everybody about everything that needs to be known and said about it, and who's both correct, non-agenda driven, competent, and capable of conveying it to you and all that sort of stuff. If you let me talk to the world long enough, eventually they'll elect me president. Your wife's gone. Sorry to hear that. Kids home from grandma soon. Okay, well, that should ease your pain over the loss of your wife. You need to unify Europe first. Hey, that's me. Well, of course, Nate Wheatshelf, as one of the things I would like to do as president is see the there was a case called, I think, Angel versus U.S. federal government, which ruled that it was okay for the federal government to have a hand in marijuana enforcement because it comprised interstate commerce, even if it was just somebody growing it in their backyard for their own use. Clarence Thomas was the voice of sanity on that ruling and said, if that's interstate commerce, then everything's interstate commerce. Then pie sale for the church banquet is interstate commerce. Okay, well, I agree. Above all else, the country needs to unify. Here's the thing. People, when asked about what they think of Congress in general, they don't like congressmen. But there's also a reality that people don't like having their hands tied. So, people, remember, when you set term limits, you are only having rules really that impact the voters. You're saying, voters, from now on, you can only vote, you can't vote for that guy anymore. The fact is, legislator is a career or a position or a job that is not a easy learning curve. For people like me, no big deal. I'd go in there and immediately understand the entire scope of the thing because I coach Congress and as a debate coach. We have Robert's Rules of Order, and so yeah, I'm knowledgeable about that stuff. What other candidate that could possibly go to the Congress or Senate has coached Congress as an event, But the thing is, allowing certain legislators to have a little bit of time to figure out how to do this thing, but also being able to reward effective legislators by retaining them and having them continue to work for your district is not a bad thing necessarily. People aren't as enthusiastic about term limits as they think they are when you start really articulating what it entails for them. They like the idea of other people's congressmen and senators being subjected to term limits, but not really necessarily their own, especially if they have a beloved congressman or senator that they elect every time. The fact that he's a career politician does not make him necessarily a bad politician. It doesn't mean that he's doing a poor job. It might correlate with that, but it's not certainly definitive. I agree, Sean Ryan Barron, that there are advantages to term limits as well, and certainly Fresh Conversations is one of them. I would say I mean, look, obviously, I'm not going to be able to do anything about term limits for Congress as president. That's something that I would have to enlist the assistance of the legislature on, and something that the legislature is not going to be very keen on embracing as an idea. So I wouldn't want to get bogged down too long talking about term limits, simply because it's not it's not something I'm going to be attending to as president. I don't know. This is one. Well, look, it's not, people don't need to be, government needs no experts on policy per se, but what it does need is experts on argumentation, experts on defensibility, experts who understand, experts on principle, experts on ethics and morality. The expertise in policy sort of comes along with those other things as an ancillary benefit. Obviously, if you're super knowledgeable about say tax code, and you know how to write tax code so that it distinguishes between this and this, and whether or not you can write this off and stuff, you might have a great deal of skill at writing that correctly, parsing it out correctly, seeing what it means correctly and everything. But if you're always just doing the job that's put in front of you well, you're not doing the job of somebody who ought to be a representative in government, because a representative in government ought not be just doing the job that's in front of them. They ought to be meta-analyzing, thinking about how they ought to be doing the job, what this thing that we're all engaged in here's purpose is, and how and whether to manifest its power in any given circumstance, and how and whether to use its power to constrain, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of things you have to be thinking about. So it is the case that you need, it's not so much you need more diversity in the legislature, in terms of, I guess you'd say, personality, and other kinds of diversity are irrelevant anyway. It's just because of how it looks. Maybe it looks good, but ideally you just have a merit-based approach that selected the country's best statesman to be the country's statesman. Well, Jen Axiel as president, my position on it is the federal government is outside of the scope of its power that was afforded by the Constitution, which enumerates those powers and precludes the government from engaging in things that are not among those enumerated powers. Among the things that are not among those enumerated powers is anything about enforcing drugs or anything. Let the states deal with it. The federal government has no business in dealing with it, and every single dollar we spent on DEA bullshit thus far has gone right down the tube. So let's disband the DEA, get the federal government out of the business of drug enforcement entirely, and defer the question to the states where it belongs. My position on it then is irrelevant. This is the sort of answer that I'm able to give two questions that is non-divisive, that solves the problem, and that proves I'm the most qualified person for president. That's the best answer to the question, right? I'm going to be asked that kind of question, the Gen X seal, so I appreciate you asking it too. The legalize or decriminalize thing. It's not a non-answer. No. It's see, Gen X seal, that's not a non-answer. I have a very precise position on what I should do as president regarding drug enforcement. Note, as president, I'm not going to get to say drugs are now legal. That's just not within my power. I don't think it's within the Congress's power either, because after all, my position is it's beyond the purview of the federal government. So, but see, James, that doesn't mean the federal government is the right agency to do that. Even if you agree that drugs must be controlled, even if you advocate strongly in favor of that, that's what the state government should be doing then. In your opinion, you should be lobbying the state government about that. It's not the federal government's job to do that. The federal government has to break the legal constraints upon itself in order to accomplish this goal, which erodes the checks and balances on various levels of sovereignty that are essential for our ongoing well-being. No matter how much you think something ought to be done, you can't tell me you want it to be done by the wrong person. Who thinks that? Oh, I see. It's Lawnmower. Lawnmower, are you getting into it with people again? But connect them all. Why connect them all? James, why would you want to connect? How do you connect them all while concurrently affording them all equal sovereignty? That means each state government has the ability to decide its own policy. They don't connecting them all, making them adopt each other's policies. That would undermine the whole idea of state having sovereignty. Okay, James, have we seen any evidence in the decades of drug enforcement and drug laws we've had of it being effective? It's never happened before that it's been effective. I mean, literally, we've spent trillions of dollars on it and stats haven't budged at all. So we know historically it's never been effective. Why would it be effective this time? Well, I mean, I've heard a lot of things like that before, James, and every time anybody like you has said before that, well, if we do it this way, it'll work, they were wrong. I mean, again, trillions of dollars attempting this thing you've wasted, and none of your ideas have worked. So, I mean, okay, well, James, at this point, I don't think any of us can trust you anymore. You and those of you who think that you can force this through and make it work, you said that before. Every time before you were wrong. You seem to not have very good judgment about what works. We've already wasted trillions of dollars on your false promises that turned out to not be true. James, you've been saying for years now that if we just do this, we'll pull the root. If we just do that, we'll pull the root. We've tried all those things, and not even a teeny budge in the stats. I think it's time for us to face reality. Now, if you want to be delusional and insist that more criminalization, more enforcement is going to do what decades of criminalization and enforcement has failed to do, then you're simply in denial, and you're going to have to ask yourself, why is it that I can't separate my negative perceptions about the harms of drugs from my understanding of what we ought to do as public policy? Why can't I separate those two? Once you've resolved that question, then perhaps you'll be able to approach the question from the right perspective and be able to embrace the right advocacy. I mean, James, they're probably held back by either common human decency or the law. So it's true if you empower a paramilitary organization to summarily kill everybody who's seen with drugs by a police officer, you can get rid of the problem. And B, of course, this is the problem with TE. James, you don't get it. I mean, the harms of drugs, almost all of them are caused by enforcement. I mean, people get addicted to things, and that's a problem. But putting them in jail doesn't stop those addictions, and it doesn't stop dissemination of the drugs. It's the problem you have when you are trying to make laws that are criminal against behavior that's not. A crime needs to be committed against a person or property, James. You can't commit a crime against nothing. You have to think. Okay, well, if in fact gangs harm people to make drugs, then that is a good argument for legalization, so it would be regulated like any other industry. So you're arguing against decriminalization and in favor of legalization. Is that your point, James? You're in favor of legalization? Regardless, it's irrelevant, right? We don't want to. We would never be right in saying that we should have the wrong person do something, no matter how much it's the right idea. You know, it's like, if you don't have the authority to do it, you just can't do it. So, well, James, again, remember, I'm arguing from the perspective of somebody running for president. Now, you and I are both in agreement that it's not okay to have the wrong person do something that may be even a good idea. So you might think it's a good idea to pull people over for speeding, but you wouldn't think it was a good idea if a teenager on driving his dad's BMW, put a little light on his car and pulled you over and gave you a ticket. That wouldn't be okay, right? You wouldn't be okay with that, James, right? So because, James, you wouldn't be okay with a teenager in his mom's BMW with a light on it pulling you over and giving you a ticket, we're both in agreement that even if something is an okay thing to do, that if it's not done by a person or party that has the authority to do it, it's not okay. So the good news is we don't need to address your question of how we should address drugs. First of all, you're not acknowledging human nature. You think that coercion is a good way to affect outcomes. It's not. Lots of psychological studies have established that. Extrinsic motivation always harms intrinsic motivation, creates resentment. Ultimately, drugs and alcohol tend to be part of a person's temporal bargaining arrangement with their identity. You're trying to take that away and control from an external perspective. I mean, if you were allowed to implement your policies, you'd go down in history and realize at some point what an awful human being you were. Just a genuinely awful human being. But fortunately, you vote for me, and we won't have to worry about your awful ideas being implemented. And I have a good reason, though, that doesn't even negate your awful ideas. It just says, look, we both agree that for the same reason why you don't want a teenager randomly pulling you over and giving you a ticket, it's not okay for the federal government to be engaged in this business. They are not authorized to do that job. They are not a police officer. They have no business giving me a ticket, right? James, look, that's not FE, that's TI. You and I both agree that it's not okay for the wrong party to do something that might otherwise be authorized. So you agree then that the federal government has no business in drug enforcement. It's not authorized by the enumerated powers of the Constitution. The enumerated powers can comprise the entirety of the powers of the federal government, the legislature in particular, and nowhere is there anything in there that would suggest that this is within their power. So we don't need to worry about, you can lobby that thing at your state level, and whatever my position on it is doesn't matter, because we don't get to that ground. We eliminate the federal government's involvement on the grounds that it's currently illegal, or at least extra legal. Well, I mean, that's the thing, James. If unfortunately you don't want to apply reciprocal burdens, because then if I think you're dangerous, I can do whatever I want to you, and nothing you can do about it. That's okay. Well, because my opinion is more important than you as a human being. My arbitrary thoughts are what matter, and you don't matter as a human being. You're just something to lock in a cage. You know, if we want to play the same game, then that's what I'll tell you, too. You don't get to have choices, James. I decide what choices you can make. If you make the wrong choices according to me, then I get to lock you in a cage. Arbitrarily. That's the game you want to play. No, Dave, you don't want any evidence. You're not saying evidence is necessary. Remember what I said. To commit a crime means you have to commit a crime against person or property. So, you want to lock someone away that hasn't done any crime. That makes you a criminal, right? If you do that, then you're the criminal. You understand? It's like if I go over to your house and take your child and say, well, your child has chosen to eat too many cookies at lunch today, so I'm going to lock him in a cage now. You would say, but you can't do that. And I say, no, I can. Because I have evidence of something that I arbitrarily think is wrong. You're right, he didn't commit any crime against anybody. If he committed a crime, then it would make sense, right? But he has to commit a crime against person or property. Since he didn't do that, obviously, only my arbitrary decision making is involved. Just like you. James, doing drugs is not evil. Think. The presumption. You gotta understand that what you think is like a societal problem, when you want to pass laws about this shit, you're saying, I want to go put a gun up to somebody's head and force them into a cage because I don't like what they're doing, even if I can't point to anybody who's been harmed by it. Even if I can't point to any boundaries that have been crossed, any violations that have occurred. Real violations. That just means you're arbitrary and awful. And you're not a decent human being then. What effect? I mean, first of all, James, that's not true. Your causal claim is a lie. There's absolutely no reason to think that drug use causes the particular thing you're talking about. Even if you can say that there's a correlation between drug use in general and some bad thing, you certainly can't establish that this individual doing drugs links directly to any specific bad thing. Most people who do drugs never commit any crimes because of drugs, on drugs, or because of drugs. 90% of people who do drugs never do anything immoral or commit any crime because of drugs. So you're going to throw them in jail anyway because drugs in general are bad. Well, 90% of people who drive cars don't intentionally crash them into people. But some do, so since you have a car, I'm going to throw you in jail. Your logic gets turned back on you. Reciprocal burdens, James. If you want to be an autocratic asswipe, you get to taste what your own laws would feel like. You don't like that. That's why you shouldn't be autocratic in that fashion. Be a responsible citizen. Take policy seriously. Take government seriously. Take argumentation seriously. Know that James, take argumentation seriously. Which means we need to articulate what comprises a legitimate rule that we can apply across the board. Otherwise, you're just continuing to claim that your arbitrary subjective opinion should justify you forcing shit on people. And that's not okay. You need to understand and accept that is not okay. What FE? This is TI, James. I'm TIing you. I'm saying you are not thinking properly. You are inadequately addressing this policy consideration with your attention. You're using the wrong attentional manner and believing it. That's bad. I'm telling you that, making normative claims. Your question should be, is Eric right about these normative claims or not? If I am right about these normative claims, then you should listen to me. And I've got some good news. I am right about these normative claims. Accursed wrongnesses causing people to be divisive, agenda-driven, and insistent. There's no reason for it, James. We have all the evidence we need that government action on drugs creates a massive criminal complex, violates civil liberties like crazy, accomplishes no net goods in terms of actually lowering drug use rates, and that in fact the correlation between drug use and anything other that's a harm is very weak, to say the least. Additionally, anytime you enforce drugs, because it's not actually a crime, you yourself become a criminal. The cops become the criminals in order to enforce these things. After all, if possession of drugs is illegal, how can the cop possess it, take it into evidence? Think. You know? Think, James. Think. James, running afoul of the courts does not make you a bad person. Only in some instances are the courts engaged with actual bad people. Thanks to you and your drug advocacies, most people who run afoul of the law are no different than anybody else. And you and me haven't committed any crime. But poor thinking like yours justifies institutionalizing these rights violations and harms that never turn out to produce any good outcomes, and that only foolhardy self-delusion allows one to continue to advocate. Now, Jordan Peterson's an ENTJ. What's my genetic lineage? I'm German. From Germany. My ancestors are from Germany. On my dad's side were Strauss. On my mom's side were Schneider. We're Schneiders. And before Schneider, on my mom's side, we were Brandstetter, so that's German too. It's a lot of Germany. That's why I like bratwurst so much. You know. Cloud, you missed a thing. What thing did Cloud miss? I do believe there are places where the mythological and the literal touch. First of those places is your mom's face. Mythologically, it sits there, mouth agape. Literally, my penis touches her nose. Together, we erupt in a riot of passion, reminiscent of African tribes dancing around a fire, trying to draw in the rain with their nudity. Oh, alright then. Well, James, I have a lot of things. I didn't mean to dismiss our thing as though it weren't special. We had a very special thing. There was some jostling. There was some roughhousing. Eventually, a little fondling. And finally, said, hey, you're okay. And that was the end of it. Isn't most of Jordan Peterson's arguments cataloged by T.I.? Well, it's interesting you use the word catalyze there. I would say that, no. His arguments are, this whole thing's not very T.I. A lot of those are like, first he goes over some stuff that he's prepared of what, what's known about a thing. And then he tends to link and then he's going to talk about more the utility, how it's used. And lastly, he really prefers empirics. Like, even if the thing is totally meaningless, he's got concrete empirics, he doesn't care they don't like throw meaning, It's weird. Because, GI ignoring. How do I think typology should be used in education? I mean, kind of a complicated question. I don't like the way the current education system is. I am a debate coach, a school teacher in different schools for a lot of years. I have a lot of things to say about education. I guess I would say, regarding typology, students would benefit if teachers knew about typology and factored their students' type into how they taught and stuff, somewhat. But the problems with education are way deeper than that. They begin way on a way lower level, I guess you'd say. The German stuff? Does it help me understand myself? No. It doesn't help me understand myself at all. It's just a factoid, Like, I guess my ancestors were German. I'm American, and ethnically, I'm racially fluid. So that means I change race regularly. I guess ancestrally, I mean, I don't really know if my ancestors were German. My ancestors may also have been transracial. I haven't really looked into it. But I'm assuming they weren't transracial and they were the same race as their locale. Then I guess they were German. But yeah, I'm transracial and I have been German before. When I become German, I tend to sound a little different. Ja, would you like to go to Bonn with me on afterwards we've got off the Stuttgart? I've got to get a pint of bitters and a bratwurst with my little green heart with a green feather on it. If I've transitioned into German during one of my racially fluid transitions, then that's usually how I sound. You can kind of tell. I guess one of the things I like to point out is there are some perks to being transracial that when I go Chinese, it does come with karate, so that's pretty cool. It's one of the only races that comes with anything. I guess Mexican comes with a fascination for sombreros, but that could just be my general fascination for sombreros. I'm not sure if that's really unique to when I'm Mexican. I mean, I do love a good sombrero, because of course, what's the advantage of a full blast Mexican sombrero? It's got your good sun protection. You can go out and garden in that sombrero, no problem. Sun is just like, hey, I can't get through your sombrero. You're like, aha, no sunscreen needed. Take that, sun. You thought you were bringing the big boys to school today? Well, I brought out sombrero. And then your sombrero hat says, what's this, senor? I will block the sun for you. I am your sombrero. Good job, Jose, you say to your sombrero. I imagine myself having a helpful Mexican sidekick sombrero. You know, to remind me to, it's siesta time, senor. Why don't you lie down in your cot while I clean up around here? Sombrero, relax. You've done plenty already. Oh, senor. Well, you know, this is the thing, Lawnmower. It's also true that when I make a racial switch to Japanese, I'm often angry at my Chinese self for attempting to co-opt what I then believe to be the property of Japan, namely karate. But I don't know, despite the fact that my Japanese self gets mad about it, nevertheless, it's the case that when I turn Chinese, I get karate again. So, proof's in the pudding. That's what they say. And in this case, pudding is analogous for karate. To hope is to already give it up. What? That's not true. That's backwards, James. To hope is to have already given up. No, hope is something that means you're not giving up. Hope specifically means you're looking forward to a possibly good outcome. Maybe it won't be disaster and catastrophe this time. Maybe this time we'll all live happily ever after. You need to stop hoping, stop moping, start doing, and quit pooing. 'Cause it's time to move on down the road. I'm pretty tired. I'm tired drunk right now. It's the equivalent of punch drunk, but it's for tired. How much did you smoke already? I don't know. I haven't been keeping track. How much did you smoke already? Did you smoke this much? This much? That's a lot. I smoked enough for this entire baseball stadium full of fans. Eric, would you date a girl who only spoke in Morse code? Excellent, excellent, excellent question. This one maybe is going to keep me up nights, worrying about whether I've answered it correctly. But I'm going to take a stab at it. Hopefully, I'm not being too impulsive here. Okay, how fluent is she in Morse code? Is she really fast with her Morse code? Is it just like, if she's chatting to me in Morse code, is it just like dash out, dash out, dash out, dash so fast that it's just like super fast? No, dash dot, Gen Xil. Morse code involves both the dash and the dot and the stop. No beeps, no clicks. No vrooms, no brooms. Pretty dang fast stop, pretty dang fast stop, pretty dang fast stop, pretty dang fast stop. Okay, so assuming she's like super fast with her Morse code, and that she has, so I want her to have a Stephen Hawking's machine that converts what she puts into words. Except instead of converting it into words, I want her Morse code to be entered into the Stephen Hawking machine, and then the Stephen Hawking machine say, dash dot stomp, stomp, dash dot dash dot dash dot stomp. If I can have that, then yes, I'd date her. Just for a little while, just for a couple of days, maybe a week. I'm looking forward to, in the bedroom, when we got it really going on. Dash, 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 dot, dash, dot, dash, dot, stop, dash, dot, stop. Honey, do you need to push on that little machine when I'm having sex with you? Really? You really need to just, can you just leave the Morse code out of the bedroom, please? Can you just save it for afterwards? And she gets all fussy. That's not, stomp, that's stomp, stomp. I'm like, let's see. Now I have killed the mood. Oh, great. Now I killed the mood. Is that what you said? Dun, 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 dun. What? What if... Rain, your question above. Let me see your question. Where's Rain's question above here? Have you seen more of the INFJ guy who made the HP Empath video? Yeah, he's still going strong, as far as I know. I haven't been there in a while, but I've heard mention of him. I mostly have heard about him on the major Morse code channels. If you're like me, you listen to the Morse radio. Every station broadcasting in nothing but Morse code. It's like, it really sums up for me an elimination of the unnecessary vectors. I don't need a bunch of complicated words and letters and stuff. Where I do need letters to fill in with the Morse code thing, but I don't need a bunch of complicated words to spell out words in Morse code, It's a lot easier to process. I combine my Morse code hobby with my ham radio hobby, and I come up with my own version of Morse code called ham radio Morse code, in which it's the same as regular Morse code, but you include breaker breaker as part of one of the things you can have in your Morse code. You can also have what's your handle, good buddy, and that's a 10-4. Any of those you can include in your Morse code, meaning different things. My dad makes me uncomfortable. He's needy FI, but I find it cringe and gay. Well, what does needy FI mean? Like, come and love me, son? Or like, do you like my shirt? Or, but you haven't been over for such a long time and I miss you and come on now, son. What kind of way does it go, you know? Which of those ways is it? That's going to matter as to whether or not you're just being too much of a spoily pants or if he's just being insufferable. Spoily pants. I'm friends with my kid. I said, hey, you, kid. What's your name? Delilah. You're my friend, right? I have to be. You do. You have to be. I require it. Oh, I just got a signal of a big slab event. I have this theory, of course, not a theory so much that it is, a superstition, I guess you could say, or a magical thinking idea. My magical thinking idea is this. Periodically, every once in a while, I'll get this sudden, like, surprise ringing in one of my ears. Usually just one, not the other one. And it differs from some occasion I get what I consider like a normal kind of ringing in my ears. Maybe from listening to something loud or whatever. This thing I'm talking about is when it comes on abruptly, can be depending on how evident it is, either very evident or less so. And I at some point determined that it was like an alarm that something significant was going on, Slavically, as I like to say, at that moment. But it was almost impossible for me to ever figure out what it was in reference to, if anything. So, anyway, I just had that experience right now. A Slavically large, omini, schmomen. Slavically large omini schmomen is what it's called. It's not necessarily a warning of something bad, just so much as an alert, a heads up that something of significance, or just, it's not really even that. It's, in my interpretation, it's the sound of slabs that had been hung up, tearing loose from each other, or perhaps the opposite. The sound of two slabs that were running independently crashing into each other and becoming entangled. Winston's mom. That was very rude. You should not pass gas on the live stream like that. People are going to think you're crude. They're going to think you're immature. They're not going to want to sit next to you because they're going to think you're smelly. Okay? Anything happened lately online that might have triggered something like that? No. This has happened before. Winston's mom. It happens randomly. That one happened for months, couple months, or months or something, and sometimes it'll happen a couple times, maybe in a week. I mean, I don't know. Could just be random, but I've assigned that magical meaning to it based on magical instincts, I guess. I think it's possible that at some point, one of those alerts will make sense to me more than just something I note but don't particularly feel as though I can get any more information out of. And when that one occurs, then it probably means I'm supposed to do something. But that was a very big one right there, and I don't know. There's a big fire in Azusa. I don't think that has anything to do with it, but I just thought I'd mention it because it means you gather about the city kind of a grand, foreboding air of smoke and the ensuing overcast. And it means pull a tarot card. Alright, I'll pull a tarot card. I pull for you, Nate Wheat Shelf, 9 of Cups. I think that's Dinner with Jesus, but I'm not sure. You have to look it up. I pulled it with my brain. How to fix FE. You don't fix FE. You don't fix your polar, you just deal with it. Any more than you don't fix your I don't know. Don't fix my butthole. I'm so tired. I need to go to sleep. I can barely stand up to go fetch anything like that even. You have to try to do something. What you gonna do? Something? Let's both do something. I gotta go to bed. With my sleeping time. Oh. Alright. Good night, everybody. I have to go to bed now. I'm so tired. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. Go over to this here with the so-called meowdy meow. Here we go. We're going to bring this meowdy meow over here. Well, that's what's normally called the meowdy meow. And here we go. End stream. End stream.